Good, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to everyone joining us from different corners of the world. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar entitled Bridging the AI Gap in Data Migration and Integration. My name is Melissa Boujoude, and I'll be moderating today's session. We're pleased to have such a strong audience joining us across functions, geographies, and organizations, which really reflects how universal these challenges are. Before we begin, just a few quick housekeeping notes. So to ensure a smooth experience for everyone, webcams and microphones are disabled for participants. You can, however, ask questions at any time using the Q&A box. Those questions will be visible only to the speakers and moderators. We reserve time toward the end of this session for Q&A. The session will be 60 minutes long, approximately. And if we don't get to all questions live, then we can consolidate and share with all attendees after the webinar. Finally, the presentation materials will be also sent by mail following the session. So today we are joined by three speakers who collectively bring deep expertise across validation, data, AI, and large-scale transformation. You'll hear from Mikkel Darling, who leads IT validation and compliance within M&A migration programs at Novo Nordisk, bringing a practitioner's view on the real-world constraints and regulatory realities. We also have Nick Larson, Director of Data, AI, and Migrations at Product Life Group, who focuses on scalable architectures, data flows, and modern integration platforms across regulated environments. And finally, Florian Perem, Digital Innovation Lead at Product Life Group, who works at the intersection of AI, data, and regulation to translate emerging technologies into deployable compliant solutions. Together, they give you both ground-level reality and forward-looking perspective on how this space is evolving. For those of you who may be less familiar with Product Life Group, a quick word on who we are. So PLG is a global service provider dedicated to the life sciences sector, supporting organizations across the full product life cycle from early development to post-market activities. With a presence in over 150 countries and a global team of more than 2,000 professionals, PLG works as a single partner across regulatory, quality, safety, clinical, IT, and digital domains. A key part of our mission is helping clients accelerate innovation while maintaining regulatory compliance. So here, how today's session is structured. So we will start with a brief framing of today's topic and why it matters so much right now. Then Mikkel will share a customer perspective based on real M&A integration experience. From there, we'll step back and look at industry-wide challenges before introducing a modern AI-enabled approach to bridging the gap between speed, scale, and compliance. We'll also walk through a practical classification example followed by Q&A. So to set the stage, let's start with a simple observation. Despite massive investments in systems, tools, and expertise, M&A integrations are still slow, highly manual, and extremely resource-intensive, especially when it comes to data. Streams might struggle with inconsistent processes, disconnected stakeholders, unclear system scope, and large volumes of unstructured or poorly governed data. All of this creates operational risks at exactly the moment when timelines are at the least forgiving. AI is often presented as a solution, but in regulated environments, it raises valid questions around validation, explainability, and compliance. So today's focus is not just about hype, it's about understanding where AI actually adds value, how it can be applied responsibly, and how it can help organizations move faster without increasing risk. And with that, I'll hand over to our first speaker, who will ground this discussion in real customer experience.
Thank you
Mikkel.
for the introduction. As mentioned, I'm Mikkel. I work at Novo Nordisk and with a lot of focus on our integration projects. And I will go through some of the challenges that we see in Novo Nordisk, which is mainly related to the IT part of it, which is the IT assessment, the data extraction, data assessment, and then system retirement. But if we start with the data assessment, if you go to the next slide. Yeah, so when buying a smaller company, we know there will be some risks. One of them is that we often see when and where to use the or a GXP system. So we see these companies with a great focus on developing fantastic products, while the CRO or CMO handles all the data. And then when the company are to store the data, they are less focused on internal compliance. So when we receive this full overview of all the IT systems from the IT landscape, we ask for what kind of data is stored in these systems. So regulatory, safety, clinical, etc. And we want to know what the system is being used for. So is it only storage, or is the data actually being used actively? It could be that the company stores the data in SharePoint, even though it's not a GXP, even though it is GXP data. This is of course not okay, but when we look at it from a data integrity perspective, and it will create some challenges in the project, but we might need to adjust the data migration strategy in this case, and we need to highlight all of this in a risk assessment. Some cases we can mitigate it by, for example, extracting and migrating data directly from the CRO and CMO. In other cases, when data has been stored wrongly and it's the only source of truth, we just have to accept it and then document it. But the sooner we know, the better. It helps us decide what data we should receive from the CRO and CMO, or if we can migrate the majority of data from the acquired company, because this is far more easy. And part of that assessment is also to see how the company qualified their own IT system. So one thing is that it is a GXP system, but we also need to check for internal qualification and managing of the system. And this is to ensure that all risks has been addressed and we have it documented in case of an inspection. Also, if we're going to inherit a new IT solution, we will have to start a mini IT implementation project where we need to update our own SOPs, interface agreements, and do this full validation of that system. So it's not something that we want to, but we might have to. And yeah, so if the data doesn't fit our target system, we might need to inherit that systems. If we move on to the data extraction challenges, we often see that when we have acquired a company, they doesn't have a compliant way of extracting data. It can be the tools they're using, it can be the documentation level, or in general, they might not have this process in place on how to extract data. So it's not something that you do every day. And when the company doesn't have this process in place, it puts some extra responsibility on us as the buying company. And this is to guide and provide some templates for documentation purpose. And this is, of course, in our interest because we want to ensure that data integrity is intact throughout the whole process. So it helps us a lot if we know the systems from an early stage, so we can prepare these extraction templates for individual IT systems, or if we can create these direct connections between Novo Nordisk and this source system. But sometimes it's not possible, and that is due to the company storing other competitors' data. Then it might be difficult, or it's just not possible. But we will go back to the more manual way of extracting data, and this is a bit more time consuming. So the whole due diligence phase and all the work done before we sign a contract is really important to speed up the whole integration process in general. But back to the phase of it. So assessing the IT landscape, it helps us set the strategy for data extraction and data migration. It helps us create these timelines and milestones. So for a quick integration, we really want to know all this as soon as possible. Also, because when we see these acquisitions becomes public, people start to leave the company, and our tasks will become much more difficult. For the data assessment, if you move on one slide, it's difficult to assess the data at the company side. So what we receive is a high-level overview of data packages related to the core product that we have bought, and our specific areas like regulatory or clinical, they will then have to look into what is the most critical in relation to a submission or to start working with the data as soon as possible. So we trust the company to provide all data that was agreed upon, but in the end, we cannot know until we are ready to retire and are deep diving into these systems to ensure that all data has been migrated. But with some dialogue and our data SMEs knowing the source systems or knowing what kind of data they are requesting, we should be able to understand if something critical is missing at least. But while we are receiving our data SMEs are working manually on assessing all this data, classifying data, and providing some metadata according to the target systems. So this is where we see some of the heaviest workloads, because when we have volumes of up to, let's say, 100,000 records, it takes a few weeks sometimes to go through all of this data and map that correctly. And this data mapping exercise comes on top of that daily work. So that also has to be taken into consideration when we ask our data SMEs to map all of this data. And this is not something that we have automated yet, and I don't expect a full automated solution, but if we could bring this down to a few days of work, it will still speed up the whole process of data migrations in the end. For retirement, it's a difficult side. If you move a slide. Yeah, so retirement is a bit difficult because it's the final part of the integration, and most people has left the company at this point. Often the company doesn't have a retirement process in place, and people who can actually execute on this IT retirement. So here they rely on external suppliers, and then these tight deadlines becomes a challenge because we haven't selected the supplier. So we need to ensure that the retirement process they follow is of our own standard, and this opens up for yet another assessment. So in general, for these integrations, there's a lot of assessment, a lot of manual work, and it just takes time. And then there are some decisions on whether we need to keep the current system or set up. It is decided much earlier, but if we suddenly see that there's a need for some non-critical data that was saved for last, we quickly need to bring in people who understands that specific data, but also understands our IT landscape to see if we actually have a system that fits data or what we actually have. But in general, for IT retirement, it requires a lot of cross-functional alignment to ensure that all data has been migrated, and we don't want to leave anything behind. But hopefully this is all documented, but sometimes this comparison of data can be tricky because what comes from one system from the acquired company might end up in multiple systems in Novo Nordisk. And when we are dealing with non-critical data, when we're dealing with non-GXP data, we may not map that as well as we do with GXP. We can also face a lot of local legislations from the country the company is located at. And all of this can delay the complete retirement, as we sometimes need to keep a financial system alive, or just a business unit due to some legal requirements, which can be up to a year. Then I brought in this what's called a diagram. So if you move a slide. Yeah, so we are trying to create this core team in general. So this is how we are moving. And as you can see, we have 4 phases. Maybe there should be a phase 0 as well before we start signing anything here. But we are very early on trying to establish a core team with experienced people. We want to create all of this high-level documentation, identify what data is urgent and how do we manage it. And then when we are working with the data, it's important to say that we can be in multiple phases at once. So urgent data may end up in target system before we have actually started mapping all other data at the moment. So phase 1 is just before we sign the contract. We need to get this overview of all the IT systems, need to assess it, and this helps us identify the urgent data. Because in phase 2 is where we map out the specifics of this urgent data. So we also need to involve all these domains that request data. And we need to do this high-level data mapping, so we ensure that the data integrity of all data is followed throughout the process. We start by creating our data migration plans, extraction plans, execute on that because we have an interim solution for data storage where our data SMEs will also work with data and map all of it before it goes into target systems. So the target systems is in phase 3. Here we create yet another data migration plan and execute on that, report on that. And when we have done this for all the data, we will end up in phase 4, where we'll start the IT retirement. We can start the retirement of specific IT systems at customer end or company end, but it will add some risks if we haven't assessed the whole IT landscape and all of the data. So normally we just wait for all data to be migrated before we start any of the IT retirements. Finally, we try to do this lesson learned, what went well, what could have been better in our next integrations. But often we have multiple projects at once, so we are learning as we go and optimizing as we go. And that was all for me.
Thanks, Mikkel. So my name is Nick. I lead the technology track at PLG, and I can only support the challenges and issues that Mikkel is talking about from Novo Nordisk here. It is the same issues, the same challenges we see across customers when we work with them on these acquisitions. There's a lot of heavy lifting on the manual side of this, classifying, looking into all of the data that you receive and trying to figure out how it fit in. And the more you try to speed up because you want to bring the data in and be compliant in your current systems. And yeah, the more you speed up, the more that you increase the risk of missing something or doing something in the wrong way. So my colleague Florian will later show you a bit on the AI side, but with the technology that is present today, we can actually automate many of these heavy manual labor activities in a acquisition context. So yeah, the technology is there. It's just about making it fit into your current process, or maybe redefining your process on how you do things. Next slide, please, Melissa. When you do an acquisition, whether this is acquiring a product or a company, it usually has impact across the entire value chain of the company. This also makes things more complicated, right? More stakeholders having to coordinate and talk together. You have your daily operations, and this comes on top. With these acquisitions, you don't know months in advance. There's a signature, and then things need to happen fast. Yeah, as Mikkel spoke about, classifying documents and data, mapping, extraction, all of these things really take a long time and can be quite a manual process. It also depends on the system that you're coming from and moving it into. I've been in projects where it's completely free text that we're moving in, so that also has issues attached to that. And the more we try to do things quicker, the bigger the risk is that we either miss something, or the quality of the data that we move is going down. The issues with these M&A activities is that the timelines are usually, they don't take into context the internal bandwidth, and that people have their normal day jobs. So it can't really be a big impact on the internal organization. And when we talk about the AI gap in this, it means that we have these activities that are high in complexity, but very low in automation. Hopefully this is what we're going to discuss on a bit later. Next slide, Melissa. Today we're only discussing the top swim lane on this, so the data migration. But of course, when you acquire a product or a company, it has impact across the company. So have the regulatory and compliance side, the market access, IT also, and the commercial side also. So in addition to the challenges and issues that Mikkel presented, this also has impact across the company, and there's a lot of stakeholders who need to align on timelines and other activities going on. So this is really could potentially have a big impact across the board. Yeah, but today we're only addressing the top line with the data migrations. I think that was the last from my side. Over to you, Florian.
Thank you, Nick. So I'm Florian. I am in charge to lead the digital innovation and the digital research at PLG. And my part will be about helping solve the question, does AI have the actual potential to bridge the gap in data migration? And of course, from my point of view, the response will be yes, or at least I hope so. But not in the perspective that AI comes like a magic box and will disrupt and rewrap everything. The key core idea here is how can we make AI system work with complementarity with the usual and legacy approach of data extraction. Landscape of data become more and more complex, and the traditional approach, as Nick and Mikkel said before, starts to show some limits. We have a strong limitation due to the volume to map the data. All data sources are not systematically very cleanly structured. Business rules are not very explicit. Critical piece of information doesn't sit into the database. Information is spread across a lot of systems. And people and developers who create database data models are not the best one to create comprehensive knowledge about it. So how can we approach this with a more surgical and tactical approach, just to see the missing part, the holes in the system, to enable an end-to-end migration model? And that's why that's what I try to showcase and demonstrate today on my side. Next slide, please, Melissa. Thank you. So to replace a little bit of context on why migration tools froze in time and data didn't, the answer is not very simple. Data migration methodology doesn't have evolved a lot in the last decade. It's still basically related on ETL, extract, transform, and load. So getting access to the source data, rewrapping it in a more convenient way, and resending it to another system. So it's basically moving data from A to B with a little part of processing in between. In the same time, meanwhile, the amount of data exploded. We are at an era where it's very easy to create a new solution. Large language model coding agent will make it even more bigger in the next years. So everybody is able to create a cloud, a SaaS, and everybody is making it in his own way. So it will become more and more complex to unify the data across the system. And when we talk about data, the most easy way to see it from a cognitive point of view is to see it as rows and columns. And actually, databases still work this way. Conventional database, relational database works with row and column that is joined and mapped together. But making it work together requires to take a little bit of abstraction and see it in a different way. Melissa, next slide, please. We see the last years, maybe the last 6 years, a huge shift, a big paradigm break that happened with the LLMs. LLMs are the translation of human knowledge through language. So those kind of systems are able to understand textual context. And the latest work in research allows also to understand textual text that is not natural language, but more business-oriented text. And it works very well with code, but it can also work with a lot of other textual described structure. And data model is a part of it. So today, large language model can interpret database modelization, can infer some relationship, can understand what a join is into a database query. And it's for us a really important leverage for data migration, because the legacy way to perform data migration requires a lot of human workload, because, as I said before, data structure is not often very well or properly defined. So human people with strong skills and expertise into database administration had to dig inside the data structure to understand it. Now, an AI system can do it very well. Next slide, please, Melissa. So I want to showcase two systems that are very, very important for a full end-to-end data migration system. And from an abstracted point of view, we can categorize them as two types. The first one is structure to structure. So data input are structured data, usually database model, conceptual database model. And the second one is unstructured to structured. Unstructured often means it's natural language that doesn't follow standards or patterns. It's basically whatever you can write into a document. That's unstructured data type. So I will show you how we can implement structured to structured automation system that leverage AI as unstructured to structured. Melissa, please. So the first one, structured to structured, and this is what covers, I think, the most common case of data migration. Your entry point is the data silo that you have as input. In merging and acquisition, it's very easy to make an example of that. You are trying to ingest and integrate the data system, the database from the company that you acquired. And I don't know if a lot of you have ever seen what conceptual data model is, or even a database is. But you can represent it as a folder with hundreds of Excel sheets. This is basically what a database is. It's hundreds of Excel sheets with a lot of columns, and column names doesn't mean, aren't very explicit. So for example, here's just a word cloud where all the column names are just for updated dates. And you can have hundreds of declination of how you want to describe and define updated dates. And sometimes it doesn't mean nothing. So in a human work labor process, to be able to really match and fit in all your tables, you need a human that need to export all your data, your tables, and look at the data types and infer, deduce from the database, from the data type, what this column is. What an AI can do in a very efficient and automated way is just navigate through a full database, hundreds of tables, thousands of columns, millions of rows, and deduce automatically the column types, the names, what it means. That's very important. The new shift is really that AI is now able to understand the meaning of the data, not just to match values. It understands the relationship. In a database, you have also a lot of methods of functions that allows you to query, to update, to insert. And a database system, if he has access to all of this information, can really understand the full concepts and the full value that delivers the database. And if you match this with AI code writing and expert rules, you can build a full agentic network that can automatically ingest data, write the ETL, recipe ETL, extract, transform, and load, and ensure a seamless integration with very different database model. Next slide, please, Melissa. So in a nutshell, what AI can bring to data migration in the case of structure to structure is going from a stage where a human user needs to understand the data schema to reasoning model that can understand it. We can switch from human work labor to map and align primitive data type from the source data system to the destination data system with an AI that can understand and parse rule-based. You can define the rules that you want, and the AI can integrate that into his own reasoning. And the third leverage is the automatic code writing to perform data ingestion. The second case that I want to showcase to you today is the unstructured to structured. What does it mean? In a lot of systems, such like a regulatory infrastructure management system, you put inside your system some files. Files are stored and hosted into data lakes. Some system add extra metadata that are stored into relational data system, and we bounce back to structure. But if you don't have them and you want to move file storage from point A to a point B, and at the same time enrich your system with some required input, such as metadata or classification, you don't have much choice today rather than perform it manually. If I have 25,000 PDF with no particular extra data that I want to ingest in a system, that requires to put labels, metadata, classification onto it. I have not very much choice than open each file, deduce with my expertise what is the classification of this file, and enter it manually. Next slide, Melissa, please. But here, AI can also put a huge leverage on it. AI is capable to deduce a lot of information from the content of a document, and it can be very fast. And what we achieved to extract from a document itself is mixing a large language model with vision language model. And we can mix textual content with what we call topological representation, because the layout of the text that is inside the document brings information. Is it a title? What is the level of the title? Is it bold? Is it highlighted? Is it in a table? Is it an image? We can also interpret image inside the document. So with the layout and the topological representation, where in the document is the bunch of text? Is it a header? Is it a footer? Is it a side note? Is it centered? Mixing topological layout and textual structure can allow us to extract a lot of information from the document. We can also add on top of that rule-based. If you know exactly that your QMS has a coding system built it from 3-letter, four numbers, and again 2 or 3 letters, you can grab and extract from the document if you have the QMS code. So you can deduce that it's a QMS document. And so we can pass dozens of pages per second to extract all this information, make them match with a rule, and enrich automatically a system. So here is a demonstration of a little tool that we have developed. It's basically a small software that rewraps all our cloud infrastructure of document classification. So state-of-the-art authentication connects to the cloud. We can configure the model of classification that we want to use. We can load it. So here we have the Vivarim document classification model. We have learned our classification model to understand the Vivarim classification model. We can define threshold of analysis. I just repeat, this is an exploration tool that we use between a digital team and expert team to refine the classification model. So you select manual review, semi-manual review, you put some threshold, you just configure your batch of analysis, you select whatever document you want. You can batch a full folder at a time. You can just make some sub-selection. It was very useful for some specific scope of documents coming from the Middle East, where we had initially some issue to classify. And this tool was the opportunity to address it. You select it, you launch your classification run. Everything is sent into our private cloud, runs into our agentic network of classification. and we receive the result and the confidence. The system, it's a non-deterministic AI-based system, so we cannot do much more than just giving a confidence of. It will never be a formal, it's this class or this class. We give a tree of probability. And here we have to work with the expert to define the right threshold of acceptable tree of probability to be able to fully automate the process. This tool allows you to refine, correct. You can put some comments. Those interactions are very useful between the expertise team and the digital team, allowing us to collect feedbacks without spending hours into meetings. So all this information are coming back to us and stored into our database. So experts are navigating and exploring the capabilities of the classification network. And at the end, you can generate either an Excel report or a more structured object. In data migration, we often use CSV or JSON. JSON is just a data representation format. And so at the end, when you are happy with your classification, you can export JSON, CSV, or Excel report that can be further used in other data migration processes. And we are done with the classification tool. So again, in a nutshell, what AI can help and leverage from unstructured to structured data is going from a model where you have to open each document, parse each page, put a high level of expertise into analyzing the document, into something quite automated and quite scalable, depending on the compute infrastructure you have. If you are a very, very good customer of your cloud provider with a very good tier plan, you can get up to 50,000 documents per hour. One document processing is between 10 seconds and 30 seconds. So you can just scale up hundreds of pods, one behind the other, to achieve 50,000 documents per hour. Everything is done in line. All pages of all documents is analyzed one by one, metadata, insights, extraction. Just name them. You want to know if there is an approval process, who is the one who signed the approval of the document, we can get it. You want the QMS, you want the version, you want the date. Here, you just have to define the rules and the extract pattern that you want to define. And for now, we didn't encounter any case where we were not able to extract the insights that we want to. And I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Florian, Nick, and Mikkel. So now let's move into the Q&A portion of the session. We've already received some questions, and I encourage everyone to continue adding them in the Q&A panel. So let's start with a few of the questions. Was one question for Mikkel. How can you get better at ensuring that all data has been received instead of waiting till the retirement phase?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. Currently, I'm trying to flip the whole process. So instead of waiting with the retirement until we are in the final phase, I would like to focus on the retirement early on. So we have all our employees at the acquired company ready to answer questions, people who knows the systems to extract information that we need. So create this overview of what's inside the system and how many environments do you have, all this kind of stuff. Get that out early on, and then detail it in a high-level retirement plan or master retirement plan. but this should be done in parallel with the focus on urgent data. So it's not the most important part of it, but it's still high on my list at least to get this uh, insurance early on before people start leaving.
So maybe just a comment on that, Mikkel. So what you're saying is starting with a exit strategy, basically. How do we make sure that we have the capacity to be able to retire these systems and know the consequences of doing this at the end of the project versus maybe making time and space for this in the middle of a project, basically.
Yes, because what I've seen is that we what's it called? We don't we compromise a bit. So we are trying to get out best way possible. But if we have planned this and we're in better time, it would have been much easier. So yes, a exit strategy from the very beginning. Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually a good segue to the AI solutions when creating that. Florian, so maybe a question to you. This is also where it's good to start with an exit strategy, right? Because you have models updating and new models coming out. So having the vision on what change if I need to change the model, right? What it's if you base your solution on cloud models, the exit strategy should be the first thing, right?
Yeah, I think it has to be seen from a different angle. So it's not the AI part that will define what is your best strategy on this topic. It will be able to analyze the data and parse the data. So it will work in any case. So it's not to systematically be taking in account as a primary condition.
Thanks for that. I just thought it was a nice segue because starting these projects with an exit strategy is a common thing and good to have.
Yeah. We have a few questions in the Q&A. Oh, the first one, the tool is impressive. Is it already being used in small scale projects or is it still in the pilot phase?
Yes.
Not even small scaled. At scale, it's being used. The tool itself, it's not to be seen as the thing that will be used at scale. It's, as I said, the exploratory and research phase. But it really calls our cloud infrastructure that runs at scale. And we are processing some hundreds, 10,000 of documents with it. It works. It works. The tool itself is not for scaling, for exploration, but the rest of our infrastructure works.
So yeah, and just to add to that, we are using the classification tool in projects with customers and having really good dialogue around those. This is a pain point with basically all companies in our industry that they move a lot of data and it takes a lot of manual effort to do. Yeah, so feel free to reach out if you're in a position where this is a challenge.
Working with the classification tool is very interesting for 2 points. The first one, it identifies quite precisely pain points and roadblocks into what the customer thought was the right pre-classification. From time to time, we receive pre-classified documents and customers ask us, can you confirm? And from time to time, we are pointing very interesting behavior. And the second one is that it forces in some way to really write down what should be the classification model, because the model cannot know or imagine what the customer wants in terms of classification. So we need and ask the customer, please maybe be very specific on your classification model. What is this kind of document? What are the pattern that allows the model to classify this kind of document? And just by performing this exercise of asking the customer to have some self-reflection about his own classification model is also very interesting to perform.
And maybe one more comment from my side on that. We have worked with customers where we did an assessment on the documents already classified, and quite a large bit of those actually were in the wrong classification. So that's also an insight that you can get out of running a process like this. Are we actually classifying against the set of rules that we have, or do we have a lot of documents in the system already that is wrongly classified? Because one of the challenges with processing this big data and doing a lot and adding AI models on top of that is that if the data that you're basing your decisions on is wrong, then that will just multiply. So yeah, good to start with an assessment on these, and modern systems like Viva and so on, you can do that assessment quite quickly, and in other systems as well. So yeah, just a note on that.
So we have another question. Can a knowledge graph help with data migration, for example, to have an overview of ASIS data and check if data are clean?
I'm not sure I understood the question. For me, there is two parts in the question. Knowledge graph can be very helpful if you already have relation in your data model. The data table is flat; it's a flat view, two-dimensional array of data. It's a flat view. For that knowledge graph, it's not necessary. It might add some information, knowing if you have duplicates, if you are consistent. For duplicates, especially for duplicates data entry, knowledge graph can be very useful to match the full overview of your data table. Not sure to be able. I'm not sure to understand the data are clean. Is it related to duplicates, to data pollution, columns that are not useful at all? In this case, yes. That knowledge graph can be very useful if your data model, your database, hosts a lot of internal methods and functions. You can add processing function inside your database. And in this case, by understanding the relations between the table that are processed by the methods and the function, yes, knowledge graph can be useful. But here we are not in our case of data migration, structure to structure, we are not here to judge or evaluate if the database can be better organized, cleaned. The idea is to cover the full scope of the data.
Thank you, Flora. Another question regarding the classifier tool. Can this tool be used also for mapping some rules like reporting rules?
I didn't understood the question.
Honestly. I think, yeah, I think we have more tools as part of the package for helping on the metadata extraction as well if there are missing data. And you can say a mapping wizard is also in the pipeline to connect these data. So yes, this is definitely something we can do in the near future.
Thank you, Nick. So maybe one more question. If If anyone has more questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat. The question for Florian, how can you track AI system decisions and ensure there is no drift or errors?
There is two sides, two possible response. The first mathematical honest one is you cannot. The tools that we are using are non-deterministic system with combinatory statistical space of billions of outputs, so you cannot. But we can, on top of this uncertainty of raw processing, add what we call guardrails. And some of the guardrails are our systems doesn't prompt out natural text. It prompts out structured data response. So we are able to detect right away from the response itself if there is some drift, if there is some inconsistency in the keys output, if the data type that we expect to have as a response is not right formatted. It's one layer that we can add not to interact with text, but with structured data output. And an LLM who was initially built to produce natural language text can also output structured data. And we are using this. We can add on top of that observation guardrail. We analyze the response and we have also other LLM nodes agent that observes the interaction, the data that are exchanged, the level of confidency. We can cross different LLM agents, what we call a council, LLM councilor, to have more output and different point of view about a response and ensure it's consistent across all point of view. So it's basically the same way as you would do in any quality assurance system. It's just adding enough layers, airtight enough to limit the risk of a drift going through.
Thank you. So as we wrap up today's session, I would like to encourage you to join the initiative of M&A community. Issues like data migration, compliance, and implementing AI in M&A affect many organizations. We aim to foster a place for professionals to exchange experiences, share best practices, and offer insights on topics such as regulation, data management, and integration. And if you'd like to get involved or have ideas to contribute, please reach out to Mikkel. His email address is on the screen. Your feedback will be instrumental in shaping this community. Thank you again to our speakers and for their insights, and to all of you for your time and engagement today.